So now we would go, there's the simulation tab where you can make and run simulations, controller tab. We have control of the controller itself, the editing the system, operator window, control panel, and then the rapid tab where you can see and run and look at your rapid programs that you currently have. But we won't go into too much of any of this right now, just because without actually having created any of this stuff while I'm creating programs, none of these, you usually don't have anything in them unless you're bringing it in from a system. So we'll go into add-ins tab and start up ArcWelding. To bring it open ArcWelding, you go to the add-ins and open up ArcWelding. And the first time this opens up, it'll take a while for it to bring everything in and to update everything. So now in the ArcWelding tab, you've got templates that you currently have created. The default ones, if you are ArcWelding, if ArcWelding is set up, or if you're set up to be able to do ArcWelding in your system, you're going to have processes, move, and arc default. Weld shapes, these are the weld shapes that you have. There's not much there. Searches, if you're already set up to use searches, you'll have the default searches in there, or if you have other searches, this will be the information in there. Tool properties, this tool properties comes into effect when doing searches. Really, that's the only time we ever change anything or edit anything with this. What you change here is right-click this and hit properties, and you're changing the different locations and distances here. So here we can hit the gas cup hit point and set where we want the gas cup to hit. So on this torch, we'll just say I want to hit it right here. And then how many millimeters of distance do you want between your wire and that point of the gas cup? Or do you want your angle to be set so that the wire doesn't touch your part before your nozzle does? So we can set this 3 is okay, 5's, I don't know, it depends upon what you want, whatever you get used to. I usually go around 5, or I usually max it out and then adjust it as I want it to. On this nozzle, I don't want to go too much because I don't want to hit there or there. This is one you have to set up and adjust accordingly. And so when you create any searches, these things have to be set up beforehand, because any searches, only the searches created after this is set up will be affected by this information here. Any searches created before this will not be affected by this. So bottom of gas cup, you tell it where the bottom of the gas cup is. A lot of this might come in right. End of contact tip. With this thing right here, there's no real contact tip here modeled in there, so I'll just call that good. Wire diameter, I think it's 1.32 is 4.045 off the top of my head. If you don't know, you can pull up a math calculator and just go 0.045 times 25.4, 0.014. There it is. There we go. 4, and that's probably good enough. It's 0.03 millimeters. 0.003 millimeters probably won't make that much of a difference. So you hit OK, and call that good there. So now the tool is set up, and that's good to go. So the other components we have in ArcWelding, you've got creating a part. You can create it from here, or you can create it from here. Create part, import part. Create a part program with customized settings. Create a part default part program. So you can go through and customize the settings here, or just create a part program. This will just create it with default settings. You can change those settings after the fact by right-clicking, hitting properties. And you can also go through and the properties, change the name of it. So you don't want this called part 1. We want to call the my test part. Change the module name. Can't have a name that's the same, so I got to give it a different name as well. Include part data. You can change the description of it. This is test 1. You can change the name of your paths. and you could add a program to run beforehand. And these ones, the path before, path after, can only come from service routines. They don't come from anywhere else. So we hit OK, and these names changed. Well, that one didn't change because I didn't change it. So you can go through and create process paths, or you can click here and create process paths. You can create a service path. You can create a setup path. Most of these I don't use because I usually use it from the drop down menu from right clicking and selecting here. VirtualArc does not work unless you have it installed, and even I've never really used it, so I don't know exactly how it is used yet. Data Manager. Here's where you can go through and edit any data you have, edit your weld data, delete any data. So you've got a bunch of pose data that you don't want to be using, you can edit them or delete them from here. And that is contained in Data Manager. Sync to VC. You can click that button, it'll sync everything, or sync the selected target you have to the virtual controller. So right now, this is my test part. I'll go to the Rapid tab just to show you. There's no module that I've created in here. So I'm going to just hit sync to VC, and it'll give me a list of what was synced out down here and any errors that showed up. And I usually have a common habit of clearing this out, so right click and clear, and so go Rapid, and then you can see my test part, and you can see paths and what I've created. And there's nothing in this because I haven't done anything yet, haven't done any programming yet, but that's where you can go through and sync things out. And you've got some freehand tools here and some default views that are automatically set here. So now, to create a path, I've already got my part set up. In the Home tab, you want to make sure that you've got your work object set up. That you can go create work object, give it the name that you want to. If it's moved by the positioner, you select the positioner, and if it's moved by positioner, this has to be from the program, has to be set to false. So I'm going to create that, and so you can see how that work object changed. I'm going to make this back to OB Station 1 because it's the same thing, I created that earlier. Here in the Home tab, you can see there's the Home tab, and in the Home tab there's the Layout sub-tab, Layout tab, and sub-tab Paths and Targets. In Paths and Targets, you can see what torches and tools you have, and also what work objects you have, and what rob targets are associated with those work objects. Currently there are none, but this one right here I'm just going to delete it, so I can right click this work object and delete it, just to clean things up. And here's your paths, and in these paths you can see what's in them, and currently there is just nothing in them. This one is only doing a proc call to call those two routines, so it's a procedure call. So now to get to programming, since I have a positioner, I can go open, right click and it open, or I can just double click it and it'll open it up. I can open up an individual path, and each of these triangles right here will indicate which path you're in, will indicate a path. Or I can open up the entire path, or the entire part program, and there I've got two paths in here, and they're separated by those triangles. So here I'm going to go create action instruction, and since this is a positioner, I have to activate the positioner for those values to be used. Here there's this pin tab right here in this top corner. I usually always pin everything up and then close them when I want to, and if you have multiple screens, you've got more area to be able to move things around and edit things, and have more area here to put your windows that you want to. So I'm going to change this to Act Unit and activate the Station 1. And so this is creating an action instruction to activate the positioner. And if I didn't have this pinned up, it would automatically close after I hit OK. So the next thing I want to do is create a PDSBOF, because those are the main two things you always put in the program. Now here in ArcWelding, you cannot copy and paste these into the next program. So if I was to create this here, I have to go create action instruction, and since I clicked someplace else, it automatically closes. So if I create action instruction, and just because I click someplace else, it's automatically going to close. So to create it here and in the other path, I can go create action instruction and create them again, or since this area doesn't have copy and paste, but the Home tab you can copy and paste. So in the Home tab, in the sub-tab Paths and Targets, I can do this down arrow, select these two, copy them, Control C, or right click, copy, and right click here and paste, or Control V. And then they are, and there they are. I go back to ArcWelding and they're automatically upset. You can also move targets around here. Depending upon how things move and what you move, the order may change depending upon where they're selected. We'll go into that later in tips and tricks video. So now basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm just going to program a path to weld this part right here. So you go create, weld, and then when you first open this up, there's this pin tab as well. The default that always is going to be there when you open up ArcWelding PowerPac is process as move. It will always open up that way every time you go to create a new path. The first time you open or close ArcWelding PowerPac and reopen it, it'll always default back to process as move. So what we're going to do is change this to arc default and set any angles we want here as default. Make sure our T-weld gun and work object is what we want. Then we've got here in the second tab in creating work object or creating welds, you've got one linear segment, two linear segments with radius corner, one circular segment, multiple circular segments, and path from edge. Path from edge I wouldn't recommend because all it does is create a lot of L moves, which isn't always convenient when you're actually programming or wanting to do a process of welding. So I don't recommend that one. Multiple circle segments, this is when you're doing an entire circle around something, around anything, around any object. I would use that because it would create a bunch of points all around it the entire time. We'll go through that here in a bit. I'll just go through some basic things here. So one linear segment or one circular segment. Those are the main three I use. One linear segment, one circular segment, or multiple circular segments, depending upon. And these only depend upon how much of the circle I plan to be welding around, or if there's a circular segment and then goes to straight segments. That's what I would do. So I'm going to start with one linear segment. I'm going to pin this up so it closes, just because if I do want to change things, or if I want to adjust things, I can keep it up. So then the default settings are snap object, and as soon as you change it here, so if I click this to snap edge, the next time I do it, it will be, or snap end, it'll use that snap end. But I usually always use snap object because it's a default one and works good for most everything. So I'm going to select that area there, and I'm going to select the end of that down over there, and this is my base plate. For this base plate, I can choose anything, but if I'm saying, hey, you know what, I want to weld this weld here, you try to choose a base plate that's common for the entire path. So this base plate here isn't common for the entire path because it's only common for this right here. So I'm going to choose that one. And you can adjust things later, so it's not the biggest deal if you choose the wrong base plate. They can all be adjusted later. So then hit OK, and the path is created. Now this stays up here, and if I decide, hey, you know what, that is the path I want, I can continue on. Now the other thing, I'm going to create this same work object again just so you can see it, and I'm going to select the different base plate. What this base plate selection does is it's going to change where this torch is facing, where that little handle right there, the torch is facing. So the first time I select it over here, this next time I'm going to select here, just so you can see the difference between these two. There, and create. And so the only difference between these two paths that I created was where I selected my base plate. Other than that, the paths are identical. So that is when you first create paths. That's the main thing about selecting a base plate. It depends upon which way the torch faces. So I'll do it one more time. I'm going to select a different base plate, and I'm going to select some surface over here, and we'll see what that looks like. So there we go. Now the path is on this side. So the base plate does affect what things reference. Get used to it, mess around with it, learn it. As you go through and do that, you'll learn different things. So it's not that big of a deal.